Hey everybody, this is Minion Soldier, and since this week most of the news we're getting is devs talking about gun sights and a lot of not ship related stuff, we're going to kind of look at one of the bigger questions that a lot of people often have is, when is my ship going to come out? Now, some people have spent perhaps less than $100 on ships. Other people have spent more than $1,000 on ships. And yet those ships still linger, in some cases, some of them closing in on a decade, where players haven't been able to operate these vessels. They have appeared in game or they have appeared in cutscenes for some of them, but we have not been able to get our hands on them. And some of them remain simply concept art, even years later. Now, last week, of course, we were talking about the Ion and the Inferno, the Crusader Industries, Ares, Ion, and Inferno. And, one of the things that we kind of touched upon was the fact that a lot of Crusader ships are being done this year. So pretty much the entire lineup, except for the Starliner, which is quickly looking like it's going to become, one of these ships that we never speak of again. But when you think about what CIG is doing in Star Citizen, which is the impending arrival of Port Orisson, which is orbiting, the planet Crusader, or not orbiting, but it's stationed in the atmosphere, in a very sci-fi concept of a breathable layer within a gas giant, which we won't get into, but is basically impossible. But I really want to dig in on that topic, but I'm just like, every time I get there, I'm just going to leave that alone. I'm just going to let that be, let that be what it is. But when you look at them building all these Crusader Industries ships, right? These two things kind of coinciding together is kind of smart, right? You have the release of a new landing area that is specifically services this manufacturer of ships, which up until the arrival of the MSR, the Mercury Star Runner, they had nothing in the game. And prior to the release of all these kind of like second-gen Crusader Industries ships, there really wasn't anything out there because the Starliner had just become this thing that had drawn a lot of enthusiasm back in like 2014, but had since become the ship that very few people really talked about anymore. And it kind of became a bit of a meme. But when you think about it, you have all the Crusader Industries ships, all the ships of note, kind of being built virtually at the same time. You have the landing site, you have all that design being able to inform and, cross-pollinate. You have all the assets being built that can work on multiple ships at once. It's a pretty efficient use of time. Now, one of the other ships that we'd like to talk about on this channel is, of course, the Corsair, being one of the best ships that CIG is proposing to put in the game. And we're all very excited to see the ship, probably none more than me. And we wonder, why hasn't this been done yet? And there have been a few moments where it kind of looked like it was going to happen, because you have to remember the context of the time. At the time, the Vulture seemed to be on the docket as being worked on. They were currently building out the red and potentially the blue in the future. So it seemed like CIG was on a bit of a Drake kick. And since they have most of those assets already done, by way of the Caterpillar and by way of the new Cutlass, it seemed like it was going to be a pretty smart move to just start work on the Corsair. Now, of course, the decision to not build the Corsair could easily be mistaken for, a form of insanity. And you could be excused for thinking that. It's a very easy thing to say, and you didn't build the Corsair? That's crazy. I myself have thought it. But when you're talking about ships and you're talking about what CIG is going to put into production, what seems on the outside like insanity is rather something that reflects the rather imperfect information that we get from CIG. Now, here, of course, is a screenshot from that notorious era of, the roadmap. You can see the Vulture, you can see the Hercules Starlifter scheduled for 4.0 in, Q2 2020. And so just in me saying that, you've probably had a little bit of a chuckle, and a little bit of a laugh. A lot of effort the community puts a lot of effort into tracking what is going on in the roadmap. And we've talked about things on the roadmap before, but ultimately I view it as kind of pointless. Because as we know, and you're probably seeing another ship there on the roadmap, somewhere around the middle of the screen, you're looking at it and you're thinking like, wait, what? They still haven't put that ship out, and they've been working on it for years. The Hull C. There's layers that are just not represented on the roadmap. There are decisions made and problems that they run into that are just not reflected here. And, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for bad. Sometimes, they want to hide the fact that they made a mistake, that they misinterpreted something or they misjudged when something was going to be delivered. And so they were promising something long before they could deliver it. I know, it's Star Citizen. Gasp. What a surprise. But and other times they just don't want people to read too much into stuff. When Chris says no, push that ship back 6 months, obviously the people who own that ship are going to flip the F out when they find out that Chris did that, and they might start saying all kinds of angry things to Chris. Whereas if it just kind of quietly disappears like the Orion did at one point, it was kind of up there and then it kind of vanished, not a lot is made of it. And so while the roadmap is an interesting reference point to come to from time to time, it is hardly accurate, and it represents very little of the process. Of course, this is the older roadmap. The new roadmap that we have, of course, it shows a lot more detail, but it doesn't really show that decision making going on behind the scenes, which is the layer that makes it mean anything. Because if we know what the motivations are, we know what the reason is, like, oh, this appeared on the schedule because this team is going to be freed up from this block of time to that block of time. This entire span, they're going to be free so we can get this ship in there. That is, that's the layer that we don't get to see, and that is the layer that is the most critical to kind of making the whole thing work. But, of course, it's not shown to us. CIG's intentions with things, it helps to know what those things are. So let's take a stab at CIG's intentions. On the screen, you're seeing the Anvil Ballista, the AAAPC that, showed up, or not really flight, drive ready, and good to go in Star Citizen. I think it was around September 2019 that this thing showed up. There was one problem with it, though. Is there was no ship in the game capable of carrying it to anywhere of consequence. So what could have been like a really amazing arrival into the game kind of fell flat. It has potential for the future, certainly with the impending arrival of the Hercules Starlifter, but currently it's more or less in the same area as the Reclaimer or the Herald. But was that always the intention? Was that always the plan? Insert image of Anvil Valkyrie here. I bet you that when these two ideas were originally come up with within CIG, the Ballista was supposed to fit within the Valkyrie. The Valkyrie arrived earlier in 2019, once again flight ready, and I bet you that the Valkyrie transport was supposed to carry what was originally going to be the Ballista. However, what ended up happening, as often happens with CIG when they build things, they end up becoming a lot bigger than they originally intended. And the problem with that is that the Valkyrie could no longer carry the Ballista, but they didn't want to throw the Ballista away. So they still released them both and said, eventually one day we'll put a ship in the game that can actually carry the Ballista to anywhere of consequence. Sound reasonable? Sound like a reasonable guess as to that is probably what happened. I'm not sure if CIG ever confirmed it, but that is my suspicion. Now, with a ship like the Corsair, we can say, hey, you know what? We do have Pyro coming up. We're not exactly sure when, but we know that this is something that CIG is working on. So there is the potential that, who knows, a pirate ship arriving with a lawless system like Pyro, a ship that can transition from that system back here to Stanton and whatnot. There could be a lot of reason for CIG to kind of put a ship like this into the game. And of course, with Ruin Station being in Pyro, there's a chance that there's a lot of illegal markets and a lot of illegal marketing opportunities, you know, available in the Pyro system. Might even be reason enough for another ship. Maybe this would be the right time and the right place to finally introduce...
Don't give me hope.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.